Welcome to the SBIDER Career podcast.
My name is Ed Hill.
And Laura Guzman.
We are discussing the career trajectories of SBIDER researchers and also those who carry out important work that enables and supports the research being conducted.
What is a postdoctoral researcher position? What are the day-to-day tasks? What skills do you develop in a job role?
Join us for this episode as we explore and discuss these questions and more. We're joined today by our colleague Warren Tennant, who's a postdoctoral researcher within SBIDER. Cheers for joining us today.
No problem. Thank you for the invite.
No worries. And so you're a postdoctoral researcher, and
Yes,
myself and Lara were also postdoctoral researchers. So we've got a crew of postdoctoral researchers to discuss what a postdoctoral researcher is and the day-to-day activities that they conduct. So Warren, in your own words, what is a postdoctoral researcher?
That's really hard to actually answer. I guess splitting up the word itself, postdoctoral meaning someone, I guess, who has to have done a doctorate degree that doesn't necessarily have to be in the field that you currently work in. And then researcher, I would think of that as someone who is really trying to push the boundaries of knowledge and understanding. Yeah, but I'm actually quite curious as to what you guys think a postdoctoral researcher is.
I think that was a brilliant description.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, I guess I got the idea that it was the continuation of a researcher path, but never thought of the exact answer of what does that mean. So what did you study before such that you ended up doing this particular position?
Oh gosh, how far back do you want me to go? All the
As
way back to
far-
school?
As far as you think it influenced you.
I guess sort of my first influence was, in school, doing sciences in general. I really enjoyed it. Fortunately, I was good at it, which always helps with, your own motivation. And then at the end of school for A-levels, I ended up doing maths, biology, and chemistry. And when I was trying to find an undergraduate program, I was looking at different university prospectuses, and one really stood out to me because I saw this one module called mathematical biology, and I thought, wait, I can do maths and biology at the same time? It kind of sort of blew my mind. So I ended up doing a degree at University of Bath, where I mostly did applied mathematics courses, so including mathematical biology, but also things like fluid mechanics. But then I also took some theory courses as well, bifurcation theory, metric spaces, analysis, and so on, which I'm not sure how relevant they are to what I currently do, but I do think that they gave me sort of the mathematical confidence to go away and then learn new mathematical concepts for myself.
Then you continue with your PhD.
Yeah, that's quite important, isn't it? I did my PhD at University of Exeter, and I did that in mathematical epidemiology. And I loved it, so it's just kind of a natural step to then seek out postdoctoral researcher position on the same or roughly within the same field.
And from you stepping through like your educational stages there, you see kind of that moment where it's like, oh, interdisciplinary areas, like they actually exist. Whereas perhaps initially in school, it's like, as you say, it's like mathematics, biology, chemistry.
Exactly.
Or perhaps it's quite distinct and separate. But then as you progress, you then start seeing these different knowledge spaces. Where do they kind of overlap, start interacting with each other? And then as you move on to the undergraduate study and then, say, PhD, then you'll be getting more and more specialised, becoming expert in a very defined area.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think what's nice about sitting in a field that's on this sort of boundary between very traditional subjects is that you get people coming in from those different sides. So I guess I would argue my undergrad degree was in mathematics. So it was nice to come from that direction and then see other people coming from biology and what we could learn from each other. And I think that really helped progress the research because I was very obsessed with the mathematics part when I first got into this field. And I think through talking to those who came from a more biological background, it made me a lot more enthusiastic about the biology and thinking about, well, what is my mathematics actually trying to achieve?
And while you were building all your career, was it clear to you that you will do a research career, or it was something you were discovering while you were studying?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I had this vision when I was younger that I wanted to be working at a university, but what I actually thought that was going to be was very different to how it actually was. I don't think it was until my third year of my undergrad course where I ended up doing a research assistant position in Canada that really gave me a flavour for, okay, this is what research is actually like. And I loved it. And I thought, okay, this is just sort of ticked. It wasn't what I was expecting, but it's ticked, the box of satisfaction. And I want to keep going on with it.
That's awesome. Do you think it's like there's some like insatiable desire to like keep learning, gathering knowledge?
Oh, yes, to some extent. I guess the further you get in your career, you're more time limited because you've got more things to do in that same amount of time. So although the desire to learn new things and expand my own knowledge is there, actually putting that into practice can be quite challenging sometimes.
And actually this leads on nicely. We'd like to discuss, so what are the types of tasks that you actually conduct day to day in your postdoctoral researcher role?
Yeah, I would say 10% is probably reading and responding to emails. 40% is programming and coding up different mathematical models or fitting algorithms or writing manuscripts. And then the other 50% is literally thinking. At least for me, I spend so much time thinking about not only what I want to achieve next, but also taking a step back and looking at my work and almost critically analyzing it of how could I make this result more clear, or what is this actually trying to tell me biologically? And quite often I find, I don't know about you guys, that my best ideas don't come when I'm sitting in the office. I think for me, my best ones are always just as I'm falling asleep. So now I've got into the habit of having a pen and paper by my bed, so I can immediately write it down before I drift off, because otherwise I won't remember in the morning.
Can relate so much. My best ones happen when I'm walking. You need to run to write them down.
That's it. It's just like a couple of days later, you're just out shopping, out for a run. Oh, wait, that's like the bug in my code. That's why it's going wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you balance your relaxed time with your work when you are so excited about what you do that it can merge with your resting time?
It's hard, particularly during the PhD. It was even more difficult, because you don't have this sort of structured, almost 9 to 5-esque time with your PhD. At least with a postdoc, you're employed technically for a certain number of hours a week, and that can actually sometimes quite be a positive thing, where you can almost convince yourself or tell yourself that, well, I'm only contractually obliged to do this much, so I should probably switch off. But the thing that I learned to do is, in my off time, to still do something. Because before I was very focused on, this is my off time, I should be relaxing, I should be zen, and not being able to do that. But instead actually just planning some activities to do, even if they are related to work a little bit, like learning a new programming language or something like that, can really just help get your mind into that sort of almost like semi-conscious state
having that time for professional development.
Yes.
So you've told us a bit about your day-to-day activities. Also within your role, are there any other tasks that you perform on a more irregular basis, or it's perhaps more one-off events?
I guess quite a few, although one could caveat it with a lot of them are optional.
It's a great point to raise that, to be fair.
Yeah, so, I mean, as you guys know, the main focus of being a postdoctoral researcher is to do your research, right? But if you want to make sure that you're advancing your career and improving your skills, you need to really be, if anything, filling out your CV with these different tasks. Off the top of my head, things like supervising PhD students, teaching undergrads, attending conferences, writing papers, publishing papers, reviewing papers and grants. Yeah.
Recording podcasts.
That's a very good recording podcasts.
A lot of these activities naturally are focused on broadening like the reach of your research, which is an important aspect of the work we do, and it's part of the research as well.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, you could do the most interesting or best research in the world, but if you're not communicating that to anyone, no one will ever know about it.
And during this time doing your research, is there a set of skills that you have developed that you maybe weren't planning to do?
Yes, and I feel like I sort of briefly touched on one, and there's sort of, I guess, two levels to this. The first skill set that comes to mind is communication. When I was younger and had this ambition of being a lecturer, my vision of it was either this sort of scientist in this white lab coat looking critically at some vial of mysterious liquid, or professor sort of hunched over a desk scribbling on a pen and paper. Naturally, that's partly true, you could argue, but as I just said, you need to be able to get your research out there. And not only that, you need to be able to talk to others, because they will really help guide your research in a direction that remains interesting and relevant, and as a result impactful, which is really what I think we strive to do.
And within epidemiology and modelling infectious disease dynamics, having the collaborative input is like one of the things I find. Like, it's brilliant to have this very supportive collaborative environment to work in, striving forward, making progress.
I guess that's part of the aspect that I found somewhat surprising once I had my first research experience. I thought the same of being almost isolated, and it's just you who produces your ideas and promotes them and moves things forward. But really, you're part of this much bigger network of researchers, some who you know and some who you don't, to kind of achieve that overall goal of pushing the boundaries of science. And then the other one was resilience and perseverance, almost as a consequence of communicating with other people. You're in part accepting critique. And when you spend months on a particular problem that you're passionate about, it can be quite difficult to actually take on critique. It's something that I struggle with. I take it quite personally, and that's really something that I've tried to work on, because I guess in essence, it's important to remember that you're receiving critique about the science and not about you as a researcher.
To those interested in working in epidemiology and mathematical modeling, what is your advice to them?
Oh, that's a really hard question, because I don't feel like there's sort of one thing that you can do, and I don't want to sort of say something that's going to limit a subset of people. But I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me from my own experience was, if you are currently doing or going to do a mathematics undergraduate degree, make sure that you take probability and statistics modules, because I did not. And that was quite, I had to teach all of those things to myself during my PhD, obviously with help. But if you have a strong background in probability and stats, you can really kind of hit the ground running. And I think find a system or a problem that excites you, because that will motivate you to overcome any knowledge or skill gaps that you might have.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Warren, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you very much, Warren, for joining us today and having this discussion.
Thank you. It was lovely being here and having a chat with you guys.